back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 10 Commander cards that I don't see in the format anymore. Talking about cards that I used to see all the time when I first started playing the Commander format, and now I rarely ever see them. Of course, this format is changing rapidly all the time, especially with the ridiculous amount of cards that we're getting, most of which are targeted specifically at Commander players. As I've been talking about pretty much since the inception of my channel, I'm not sure why all of the focus on Commander when it's already the most popular format in the entire game of Magic. I think they could probably lay off a little bit, but I digress. I like to go back and look at some of these cards that I used to see all the time and talk about why I don't see them anymore, because I think it gives a lot of especially newer Commander players, but also the older ones as well, some real insight into how different this format has changed over the past like 6 or 7 years since I first started playing it. And of course, some of these cards even came out after I started playing the Commander format and have started to disappear. Things have changed a lot in the last few years, so let's get to the list. And I'm going to start out with a really interesting one. Standstill, 1 and a blue, enchantment. Whenever a player casts a spell, sacrifice Standstill. If you do, each of that player's opponents draws 3 cards. Really fun, interesting card in a Commander game, and used to get played a lot when I first started playing. Not a ton. I mean, it wasn't like rampant growth or anything like that. It was a card that was played quite a bit though, because it was a pretty decent draw option. Even in blue, it was a pretty decent draw option. I saw this card all the time, and in fact, I had completely forgotten this card even existed until I started doing my Heliod the Radiant Dawn deck tech, and I thought, hey, that's an interesting card in that deck, because of course it is having your opponents draw cards, which is what you want, but also your commander, when it enters the battlefield, returns an enchantment from your graveyard to your hand, so that part kind of works as well. That's why I include cards like this in these videos, right? That's why I make these videos, because as I'm doing deck techs and combing through all the cards that I look at, I'll come across cards where I'm like, man, I used to see that card all the time in the Commander format, and I never see it anymore, and this is certainly one of those. Next up at number 9, Seasons Past, a card that came out probably right after I started playing the Commander format, and so for that reason is probably why I saw it all the time. 4 green sorcery. Return any number of cards with different mana values from your graveyard to your hand. Put Seasons Past on the bottom of its owner's library. This card, when it first came out, immediately started getting used in the Commander format like crazy. It was a fantastic option for getting a whole bunch of stuff back, right? Later in the game, somebody would cast this for 6 mana and you can get 4, 5, 6 cards back out of your graveyard and return them to your hand. It was a great way to refill your hand, right? You can almost think of it as a card draw option. And again, I will point out that back then when this card came out, green wasn't actually that fantastic at drawing cards in the Commander format. So getting stuff back out of your graveyard could sort of be seen as an option for that, right? It is card advantage. It's essentially the same thing, and in some cases even better, because you can get exactly the cards you want. This card was all over the place when I first started playing Commander and doesn't see a whole lot of play anymore. It is still in 13,000 decks on EDH Rec, so people still are playing it. I think it is pretty good. I will point out, I'm not saying any of these cards aren't good. They are all good Commander cards. There's still a lot of them, in fact, Commander staples. The point I'm trying to make with this video is these are cards that I saw a ton 3, 4, or even 5, 6 years ago, and I almost never see them anymore. I haven't seen this card in a Commander game in years. Next up, Merciless Eviction. That's right, 4 white and a black sorcery. Choose one. Exile all artifacts, exile all creatures, exile all enchantments, or exile all planeswalkers. So of course, this is still a relatively popular card in the format, but I'm not sure why it would be. To be quite honest, this for me is not really a playable card anymore unless you specifically want one of these effects about maybe exiling planeswalkers or something. You know, that is probably the only part that makes this card unique. Other than that, we have so many other board wipes in the format that are way better than this, particularly Farewell. I mean, when they printed Farewell last year, that made this card mostly obsolete. I mean, Merciless Eviction is only getting one of these card types. Farewell can get all of those card types. Again, Planeswalker being the only one that Merciless Eviction is specifically getting. So that to me is the only reason why maybe I would ever play this card. Used to be the most popular board wipe in the entire format for a while. Standstill has fallen off quite a bit. It still sees a decent amount of play. I don't know how many people are still playing it. For me, I think there's at least 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 board wipes that are better than it because, of course, you're in white and black, which has a whole lot of great options there for board wipes, right? If you are still playing this card, maybe you can let me know in the comments below specifically why. It does have really cool art. For me, though, I never play it, and I have not seen this in an actual Commander game in a long, long time. Coming in at number 7, talk about a Commander staple for a while, Lord of Extinction. 3 black and a green, elemental, and has power and toughness, each equal to the number of cards in all graveyards. So, of course, in a Commander game, this thing is going to be enormous. And man, this was a go-to for so many decks. I guess if you played a black-green deck, you just put this in there, right? There was a lot of cards back in the day because you didn't have a whole ton of options that if you were playing those particular colors, you just auto-included that card no matter what, right? I talked about this with Assemble the Legion. That was another card that I saw all the time. If you were playing a Boros deck, you put Assemble the Legion in there because it was just considered one of the best Boros cards in the Commander format. So you just put it in there no matter what you were doing in your deck. Lord of Extinction was the same way. If you're playing a black-green deck, and I guess in particular a graveyard deck would be even better, but you really didn't need to because this counted all the cards in all players' graveyards. So of course this guy was going to be enormous no matter what the situation was, and I saw it all the time. Man, I saw this guy almost every day when I was playing Commander, and I never see this card anymore. It still is in about 9,000 decks on EDHREC, so people still do run it. I would say this is one of those cards though that you probably put in your deck for a specific reason, like a Jared deck. This was always a great fit because of course Jared is looking specifically for a creature's power, so it's kind of a one-shot with that Commander. Pretty good include in that deck still. Other than that, you don't really ever see this card anymore. Coming in at number 6, Sire of Stagnation. 4 blue and a black Eldrazi with Devoid. It's a 5/7. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, the player exiles the top 2 cards of their library and you draw 2 cards. That's pretty good, right? If you just look at that ability on its own. And the exiling cards part I always thought was just okay. I guess if you are in a blue-black milling deck, that is a little bit of an added bonus, but mostly this card was played because whenever a land entered the battlefield under an opponent's control, you got to draw 2 cards. That's incredible, right? I remember when I first started playing the Commander format, this card was everywhere, and whenever someone would play it, I was like, man, this card is bonkers. I play a fetch land, they draw 2 cards, I crack the fetch to go get something else, they draw 2 more cards. That's insane card draw, right? So of course, this card was played an absolute ton in the format. It is fantastic still in the Commander format, has really fallen off. Again, I saw this card all the time. It is still in about 17,000 decks on EDHREC, which means it still is played a lot. I would imagine the 6 mana is just a bit much for a lot of people. I would say a lot of the cards on this list, they are pretty pricey. In fact, 7 of the 10 cards that I'm talking about here today are mana value 6 or greater, which might play a lot into the fact why these cards aren't played anymore, right? 6 mana is, it comes down and your opponents aren't playing lands as much anymore, so maybe it's not good. Obviously, this card would be way better if it was a lot cheaper. On turn like 6 or 7, it gets less good because your opponents aren't playing land nearly as much and of course aren't really ramping at all. I still think it's really good. If I was putting a blue and black deck together, I would certainly give it consideration, but certainly this card doesn't see nearly as much play in the format as it did a few years ago. Next up, we got Zendikar Resurgen, and this one in particular, again, was a card that when they printed it in Oath of the Gatewatch, just immediately became a Commander staple. And then of course, shortly after that, because it became a Commander staple so quickly, was reprinted in Commander 2017 because people were using it so much. I saw this all the time. Like, it was almost an auto include in a green deck, which is saying a lot considering the amount of auto includes that a green deck could have. It was everywhere, right? Not only were you getting the double mana effect, but you were also getting card draw as well. Again, it still is a really good card in a Commander game. If my opponent plays this in a Commander game today, I'm going to be trying to find some removal to get it off the table because it can really change the outcome of the game. But again, it is a 7 mana enchantment, and I think that's why people have shied away from it a little. It is still a pretty popular favorite card in the format. For me though, I never see this card anymore. Again, I'm comparing it to what I used to see, right? The cards on this list are, I used to see it an absolute ton, and I don't really see it anymore. It's probably been over a year at least since I've seen a Zendikar Resurgen in a Commander game. Next up at number 4, I got a couple doozies in a row here. Magister Sphinx, 4 white, blue, black, artifact creature Sphinx, 5/5 with flying. When Magister Sphinx enters the battlefield, target player's life total becomes 10. Remember this card, everybody? A lot of people that have been playing Commander for as long as I have, or maybe longer, will be like, oh man, I totally forgot about that card, because this was one of those cards, again, that people would maybe almost make a Esper deck just so they could play it, because the effect was so punishing in a Commander game, right? If you had 40 life and you're making your opponent's life total into 10, that's a 30-point life swing. And in particular, if your opponent happens to be playing a life gain theme, it's even worse. Like, it really was a punishing effect. And I think in particular, why people liked it is because you could target that one guy. You could be a little vindictive with it, which people can tend to do in Commander games. And people would do that a lot, where you killed my Commander earlier in the game, or you destroyed my Zendikar Resurgen, or you killed my Sire of Stagnation, which I really, really needed. Now it's payback time. So it was sort of a vindictive payback card, which people really liked a lot, and they wouldn't necessarily make the best decision with it. They would just target the guy that they really didn't like and make their life total 10. Maybe that's a reason why it is played less, or maybe it was played less because it is a 7-mana creature, maybe because it's 3 colors. Whatever the case may be, it was a card that I saw all the time that I haven't seen in years. It is only currently in about 6,000 decks or so on EDH Rec, not a whole lot. Still does fit really nicely into specific themes. It is a enter the battlefield ability, so if you're blinking in Esper colors, it's a great fit, because of course you can reuse it over again and make all your opponent's life totals 10. If you're in an artifact creature theme in Esper colors, which of course there are a few commanders that are doing that, it still is a pretty decent fit. Again, it's just one of those cards that if you were playing those colors, you just auto-included it in your deck because it was such a powerhouse later in the game. I never ever see this card anymore though. Next up, very similar effect is Soren Markov, 3 black, 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 Planeswalker. Soren, of course, 4 loyalty counters, and you can +2 it to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. You gain 2 life. But most importantly, and the reason why people always played this card, is the -3 is target opponent's life total becomes 10. And of course, you could do that immediately. This comes down and you immediately -3 it to make that guy that you don't like very much, or that guy that killed your commander earlier in the game, make their life total 10. So again, essentially the same thing as the Magister Sphinx, but this is mono black, so it could fit in a lot more decks. And again, this was just an auto include in so many, especially those sort of good stuff mono black decks. They would always play this card, right? Because you just go after the guy that had the highest life total, or the guy that was way ahead on board, or the guy you just don't like very much. And this really was that vindictive card that people played a lot. I saw this come out so many times where a guy was just like done for. Like there's no way he's winning the game, but he's going out with a bang, and he's going to play his Soren Markov and make the guy who's way ahead on board into a life total of 10 and make his life more difficult. I don't know. Is that a vindictive play in a Commander game, or maybe it's just a good play? I don't know. That is up for debate. The vindictive sort of menacing part about Soren Markov and Magister Sphinx as well might be part of the reason why those cards see less play, because it is sort of mean, I guess, picking that one guy to make their life total 10. It is very effective though, and if you have that one player that is way ahead or has like 100 life or something, this is a very powerful outcome. Again though, I saw Soren Markov all the time. If you were playing a mono black deck, for sure, it was like an auto include for people. If you were playing a couple of different colors in black, people would shoehorn it into their decks a lot. I mean, the +2 is not bad either, but the -3 was the big one, right? In fact, I don't even know what the ultimate does on this card. I've never seen anyone actually do it. What is it? -7. You control target player during that player's next turn. Okay, so it's a Mindslaver effect. I've never actually seen that, because everyone always -3s this right away as soon as it comes out in a Commander game. And then, of course, pretty quickly after that, it dies because no one else wants to have their life total become 10. So I've never actually seen the ultimate on this guy before because that -3 ability was used so much. I haven't seen this guy in a Commander game in years. Do you guys see this card anymore? I never see it. Coming in at number 2, again, another card that a lot of Commander players that have been playing for as long as I have are going to go, oh yeah, I forgot about that card. Attica Valkyrie for white, snow creature angel 4/5, flying vigilance. Tap. When a target creature other than Attica Valkyrie dies this turn, return that card to the battlefield under your control. This was a Commander staple for a long time. Originally came out in Cold Snap, but was reprinted in several Commander sets because people really like this in the Commander format, and in particular because I guess it has vigilance, so you can attack with it and then use its ability after the fact, and you want to be using it on your opponent's turns because of course you could steal your opponent's creatures with this, right? That's what made it really interesting, was it is a white card that allows you to steal your opponent's creatures because it's when target creature dies this turn, so you can choose your opponent's creature if someone's casting a board wipe, and then it'll come back into play under your control. Again, I think this is a situation where it's 6 mana and it's got a tap to use its ability, so it is a little too slow for today's Commander format. Maybe I'll just say one of the reasons why this card was brought to my attention is because of the Lulu deck that I was putting together, or the several Lulu decks that I was putting together, and I thought Attica Valkyrie was a fantastic fit in a Lulu deck, of course, because you want stuff to be leaving the battlefield, and maybe you want creatures to be leaving the battlefield, which Attica Valkyrie's ability works with, and also it is a tap ability, so your Lulu is going to be untapping it so that you can use it on your opponent's turn. So might want to consider it for that deck. Other than that though, man, this card I have not seen in forever. Again, it's one of those cards I completely forgot existed and used to be played in the Commander format like crazy. All right, and coming in at number 1 for cards that I don't see anymore is Oracle of Moldaya. That's right, 3 and a green elf shaman 2/2. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play land cards from the top of your library. So I know a lot of people will see me having this at number 1 and think, you're crazy. People still play this card all the time in the Commander format. And you would be correct. This is currently in 73,000 decks on EDH Rec. That is quite a bit. However, again, this video is cards that I don't see anymore, and in particular comparing it to what it used to be, right? This was the most Commander staple maybe ever in the history of the game. It was, if you were playing green, which of course was probably and maybe still is the most popular color in the Commander format, you were playing this card. If your deck was green, and I don't mean mono green or 2 colors, even if it was 5 colors, you were putting Oracle of Moldaya. It was one of those cards that you just auto-included in every Commander deck, no matter what, because it was considered to be that good. And I gotta say, I never particularly agreed with that opinion. I have never put Oracle of Moldaya in a Commander deck. I didn't think it was that good, and in particular, I didn't love the part where it revealed the top card of your library. I don't love showing people what's on top of my library because it's essentially, I just show everyone the cards I'm drawing every turn, so everyone knows what I have. I don't love that in a Commander game. It's a huge disadvantage. People didn't care. Despite the fact that it had that disadvantage, this card was one of the most popular cards in the entire format. Insanely popular in the Commander format when I first started playing, and of course it was really expensive for that reason, and it got reprinted a lot for that reason and has really fallen off. Again, it's still a decent card in the Commander format, probably mostly in a landfall theme. I would say that is going to be where this card really only sees play anymore, is in landfall decks where you need that additional land per turn. It probably doesn't see a ton of play outside of that. It used to see play, again, in every Commander deck. If you were playing green, that's how popular it was. It is currently only in 6% of the decks it could be in on EDH Rec, where back when I first started playing, that would probably be more like 60% of the decks it could be in. I'm not being hyperbolic at all here. I'm being completely serious. So yes, it is still a reasonably popular card in the Commander format, but maybe there are better options, like Augur of Autumn, for example, is a card that will let you look at the top card of your library, right? So you don't have to reveal it. It's getting rid of that horrible downside of Oracle of Moldaya, and you may play lands from the top of your library. It can also allow you to play creatures from the top of your library. So I think a lot of people may have have replaced Oracle of Moldaya with Augur of Autumn. It is, in a lot of situations, again, outside of a landfall deck, I would say it's a better option for doing that. So I think that hurt it a little bit. But again, still is a relatively popular card in the format, but nothing compared to what it used to be. Believe me when I tell you, okay? And you can ask anyone, or you guys can comment below how popular this card was in the Commander format. It was just an auto include in almost any deck if it was green. That is certainly not the case anymore, right? By comparison, this card is not played nearly as much as it used to be. There is no doubt about that. That is it. That is all, though. Just 10 more cards that are Commander staples still, I guess, but I used to see them an absolute ton in the format back in the day, and I don't ever see them anymore. Not a single card on this list have I seen in the last 2 years. And again, of course, a lot of that has to do with the amount of content we're getting, the amount of cards that are being pushed into the Commander format, but also it has a little bit to do with maybe those cards have lost a little bit of their luster. Maybe they're just too expensive. That's why they don't get played anymore. You guys let me know in the comments below what you think. And also let me know in the comments below if you have any Commander staples that you have noticed have completely disappeared, that nobody plays anymore, that used to get played all the time. That is it for today, though. And thanks for tuning in.